This brief presentation is essentially about how we talk about evolving frameworks. You also might want to call it coarse frameworks, but essentially the main problem is that we want to keep identifiers of certain statements the same across multiple published versions of a framework. So essentially, the overall scenario is that what we want to do is move from having a competency framework document that has all of our explicitly defined items as our versions, and actually think about a pool that would have all items from all versions. It's kind of in the background. And essentially, we're going to be pulling in those items, and I actually show a live demo of this, pulling in these items into our version documents, either using multiple as child of associations or as part of. So the version 1 still has kind of its base reporting categories, you might want to call it, or kind of these major organizers that are actually in the document. But then attached to them, instead of seen as strictly as child of associations, we want to call them as part of perhaps. But again, they're coming from other documents. Like the lowest level is actually going to be coming from other documents probably, so that we can do this work. So we have a version 1.0. I can then go through, and these all have associations to the lowest level. For that's again the stable identifier or GUID coming from the competency statement pool. And that's published, right? And then we want to make a minor revision. And so we can actually then go through and say, okay, version 1 is a new framework, and I can use like an association group to keep track of this, but I can then make associations to my adopted framework in order to say, hey, this has been added to my overall working framework, right? Or maybe I've made some updates and I can use replace by to show that. It wouldn't show deletions because, again, if I published it once, it has to remain there in order to be accurate across badges and common cartridge, etc. But at least I can add things. I think that this is overall a pretty elegant solution because we need to be able to keep adopted frameworks adopted. We obviously don't want to be editing an adopted framework and adding things because it might mess with human coding schemes, etc. Although we should be using GUIDs to talk about what statements are actually in the framework. And again, I can be adding things and changing all throughout the life cycle of a framework. We can also think about, again, it's for courses, it's for if we have kind of a broad framework and then we want to add statements underneath that aren't part of the true framework per se, but we have kind of this, kind of like a derivative framework in a way, or maybe we want to only show certain levels, and so we can keep those levels separate and then just tie them back to the original base document. Question I have, I can definitely see how it works from a competency statement purpose. We want to keep the competencies servers, like the case server, as a service that other specifications and products can be pulled from. What I am not 100% sure of is when it comes time then for a major version update, how do we let the system know? Do we just keep moving the same CF items, which are the statements that have the same GUID into like a 2.0, for example, and then kind of add all the 1x document statements? I'm not 100% sure how that's going to be made clear. Right now, we've been using kind of a system of associations to do that. I guess it'd be simple. We could say, okay, look for all the ones that are the same and ones that aren't there anymore. But I feel like there's got to be a better way to do that down the line. And I don't want to make a decision now about not putting CF items within their own versioned frameworks, and then later find out we had to do that. So here it is in a demo form. So I actually used a copy of a real framework. I think it makes more interesting when we see everything in real. So I have my errata document, and I'll come back and show that in a minute. And I just have a couple items in there to kind of show. You can see that like this one is something that's been added. This one was replaced. Okay, but that's my errata, or my 1x, if you will. And then when I look at my actual other document here, okay, so this right now, again, is kind of still the old model where I have a bunch of statements, parent, child, etc., and then my lowest level right now are all children. But what I'm suggesting here is that I actually use this as part of to introduce additional framework, additional items that are, they would be children if I started out here. But now, again, I've actually made, I'm pulling them in as additional statements. And so what I can do is that. And then this one here says it's been replaced in the errata. So this gets a little bit tricky. Like if I could diagram this out like I did earlier, right? So this statement has changed. So it's been replaced by something in my errata. And I can see that when I go here and I look at the association groups. So I can see that I now have added a statement. That's the is part of here. So I added this particular statement to my WPS.voc, right? I added it there. And then this statement here was replaced. So it's pretty interesting just to be able to see this pretty easily, I think. To see, all of my changed statements are going to be in these 0.1 documents, but technically those are also part of, the overall package, right? But that way I'm not changing my adopted framework. So feedback, questions, better ways of showing it are welcome. And again, I think to me, this is serving the use case of having a case framework that's published, but still be able to change it while not changing all the GUIDs every time I want to make a minor revision.